price awaits one way or the other. So I tell people all the time, I'm either going home or home. So I'm either going home to the world or home to God. So.
In October 2001, the quiet, affluent community of Bentwater, Texas, became the epicenter of a crime so senseless it defied all reason. A 50-year-old nurse, her 16-year-old son, and his 18-year-old best friend were brutally murdered over the course of a single night. The motive wasn't passion, revenge, or a high-stakes robbery. It was for a red Camaro and a white Isuzu Rodeo. The investigation would uncover a chilling plot, a detailed confession, and DNA evidence that seemed to lock the case shut. Two 19-year-old friends, Michael Perry and Jason Burquette, were arrested and charged with capital murder. Both were found guilty of the same horrific crimes, yet in a stunning twist of judicial fate, only one of them would be sentenced to die. Please note, this case contains descriptions of violence and disturbing themes. Viewer discretion is advised. How does a justice system sentence two co-conspirators to vastly different fates? What happened inside that courtroom to spare one killer's life while sealing the other's? This is the story of a crime that forces us to question the very nature of guilt, mercy, and whether justice was truly served. If you're new here, subscribe to The Executioner's Pen for more deep dives into the cases that shape our understanding of justice. And let us know in the comments where you're watching from. To our returning viewers, thank you for your incredible support. Your likes, shares, and comments help our community grow and bring more awareness to these important stories. To understand how two teenagers became triple murderers, we must look at the fractured worlds that shaped them. On the surface, Michael Perry's life seemed to have a foundation of hope. Given up for adoption by his teenage mother, he was placed with a loving family who was desperate to give him a fair start. But from the very beginning, a storm was brewing inside him. By first grade, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. By seventh grade, it was oppositional defiant disorder. By eighth grade, conduct disorder. Each new label was a clinical term for a terrifying reality. Michael was becoming dangerous. His adoptive parents, Gail and James Perry, tried everything: counseling, therapy, specialized schools. But nothing could contain his destructive impulses. He stole his mother's jewelry, crashed the family van, and broke into neighbors' homes simply to destroy their property. At a reform school, his darkness became explicit. He chillingly told a staff member, "I don't know why people like me are going to rape or kill your kids." After graduating from a treatment center in Mexico, he chose homelessness in San Diego over returning to his family. There, he descended into a world of drug addiction and survival sex, cementing a deep-seated anger at a world he felt had failed him. Jason Burquette's childhood wasn't just broken, it was a living nightmare. His path was poisoned before he was even born, his brain damaged in the womb by his mother's methamphetamine use. His father, Delbert Burquette, was a career criminal who ruled the family home with terror. Jason and his siblings grew up watching their father beat and rape their mother. The abuse was relentless, passed down from Delbert to his children, and from the older siblings to Jason. Their house, running on food stamps and fear, was a training ground for violence. In Jason's twisted world, the man who destroyed his family was also his hero, a model for how to take what you want through brute force. In the months leading up to October 2001, these two volatile paths converged. Michael, with his reckless, unfocused anger, and Jason, who had been taught that violence was the only solution, found each other. They were a lethal combination, bonded by drugs, crime, and a shared desperation. That's when they started talking about cars. Nice cars, the kind they saw in the driveways of Lake Conroe. For two broke, addicted teenagers, that simple desire would soon curdle into a deadly plan. The target was the home of Sandra Stotler, a 50-year-old nurse who lived in the gated Bentwater subdivision, a place synonymous with safety and security. She was a caregiver by profession and a devoted single mother who had worked tirelessly to provide a good life for her 16-year-old son, Adam. Their lives were modest but comfortable, symbolized by the two cars in the driveway, Sandra's red Camaro and Adam's white Isuzu Rodeo. To Michael and Jason, these cars represented everything they felt they were denied. On the evening of October 24, 2001, their plan was deceptively simple. They would gain entry to the house, wait for the family to sleep, and quietly leave with the keys. It was supposed to be a clean, non-violent theft, but the plan fell apart within minutes. When they arrived, Sandra answered the door and told them Adam wouldn't be home for hours. The simple theft was no longer an option. As they drove away, desperation took hold. They parked down the street, and the mission changed. Jason would distract Sandra at the front door while Michael, armed with a 12-gauge shotgun, would sneak in through the garage. Michael crept through the silent house and hid in the laundry room, a predator lying in wait. He knocked on the back door from inside the house, a chilling ruse to lure Sandra to her death. When she opened the door, he fired. The first blast from the shotgun tore through her body, but the 50-year-old nurse fought back, struggling to get up. Michael fired a second, fatal shot. She was gone. They wrapped her body in her own bedsheets, loaded her into their truck, and drove to a secluded spot known as Crater Lake, where they dumped her body into the dark water. But the horror was just beginning. Back at the house, they couldn't find the keys to the Camaro, the prize Michael wanted most. Their gruesome act had so far been for nothing. So they made a new plan. They would return and get the keys and the second car from Adam when he came home. They drove back towards Bentwater, now with Jason's girlfriend, Kristen Willis, in the truck. They concocted a story to lure Adam and his friend, 18-year-old Jeremy Richardson, who was with him that night. They flagged the boys down at the community gate, claiming a friend had been accidentally shot in the woods and needed help. Adam and Jeremy, two decent kids raised to help others, didn't hesitate. They followed the truck to a dark, wooded area. As Kristen Willis waited in the truck, terrified but silent, Jason Burquette led the two boys into the trees. He shot Jeremy Richardson first. Then he calmly walked back to Adam and asked a chilling question. "Did you hear those gunshots?" He promised to take Adam to find the others, leading him deeper into the woods before shooting him 3 times. While the two boys lay dead, Michael Perry walked over to Adam's body, rifled through his pockets, and took his wallet and car keys. With the keys to both cars finally in hand, they drove back to Sandra's empty house. Michael got into the red Camaro, his prize, while Jason took the Isuzu Rodeo. Then, as if to celebrate their night of slaughter, they drove to a local nightclub. But what investigators would uncover next, hidden in plain sight, would change the case forever. For 2 days, Michael Perry drove Sandra Stotler's red Camaro as if it were his own, a trophy from his conquest. His belief that he had committed the perfect crime was shattered on October 26th, when a routine traffic stop escalated into a high-speed chase. Perry crashed the Camaro and fled on foot, but was quickly apprehended. In a moment of supreme arrogance, when police asked for his name, he gave them Adam Stotler's, the 16-year-old boy whose murder he had orchestrated. They found Adam's wallet in his pocket, booked him under the victim's name, and incredibly released him on bond. The very next day, the case broke wide open. A citizen discovered Sandra Stotler's body floating in Crater Lake. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, led by Detectives David Park and Kenny Dunlap, now had a homicide on their hands. They began searching for Sandra's son and the 2 missing vehicles, completely unaware that one of her killers had already been in their custody and that her son was also dead. The killer's freedom was unraveling. On October 29th, a paranoid Perry showed up at Kristen Willis's house, pointed the shotgun at her head, and made a terrifying threat. "I have already killed somebody. It's not going to hurt me to kill anyone else." Fearing for her life, Kristen would soon become the prosecution's star witness. The final act came on October 30th. A deputy spotted the stolen Isuzu Rodeo at a truck stop with Perry and Burquette inside. As officers moved in, the pair made a final, desperate attempt to escape, striking a deputy with the car before crashing into a store. They were captured, and their killing spree was over. At the station, detectives began questioning Michael Perry. What came next was not a denial, but a story, a full, unvarnished confession delivered with a disturbing lack of emotion. He detailed every moment, hiding in the laundry room, shooting Sandra twice, dumping her body, the lie they told the boys, and watching Jason execute them in the woods. He knew details only the killer could know, facts that had not been released to the public. The confession was damning, but investigators needed more. The crime scene at the Stotler home was meticulously processed. Underneath one of the victims in the woods, forensic teams found a cigarette butt. The DNA on it was a perfect match for Michael Perry. It was the physical evidence that corroborated his entire story and placed him squarely at the scene of the murders. The trail of arrogance had led directly to a confession, and science had just slammed the cell door shut. With an ironclad confession and DNA evidence, the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office had a powerful case. To streamline the complex proceedings, prosecutors made a strategic decision. Michael Perry and Jason Burquette would be tried separately. Perry would stand trial for the capital murder of Sandra Stotler, the woman he admitted to shooting. Burquette would be tried for the murder of Jeremy Richardson. Both men faced the same ultimate punishment, the death penalty. In February 2003, Michael Perry's trial began. By now, his story had changed dramatically. He claimed his detailed confession was false, beaten out of him by intimidating detectives. His new narrative painted Jason Burquette as the lone killer and himself as an innocent bystander, manipulated and terrified. But his defense couldn't explain away the evidence. The prosecution, led by Mike Griffin, played Perry's taped confession for the jury. For hours, they listened to Perry's own voice calmly recounting the brutal murder of a defenseless woman. They presented the DNA from the cigarette butt, an irrefutable link to the crime scene. Then Kristen Willis took the stand. Her testimony was devastating. She told the jury about the lie used to lure the boys into the woods and the chilling threat Perry made to her with a shotgun days later. The jury was left with the image of a cold, remorseless killer. It took them only 2 hours to find Michael Perry guilty of capital murder. 8 months later, Jason Burquette faced his own jury. The evidence against him was equally overwhelming, and a guilty verdict was swift. But the sentencing phase took a completely different turn. His defense team, led by attorney Stephen Jackson, built their case not on innocence, but on mitigation. They argued that Jason Burquette was not a monster born, but one made. They brought in psychologists to detail the horrific, relentless abuse he suffered at the hands of his father, Delbert. Then, in a moment of extraordinary courtroom drama, they called Delbert Burquette himself to the stand, bringing him from the prison where he was serving time for indecency with a child. The career criminal, the man who had created this broken boy, stood before the jury and wept. "I was a horrible father," he confessed, his voice choked with emotion. "I failed my son and my family." He begged the jury to spare the life of the son he had so thoroughly destroyed. The raw, unexpected display of remorse from the father had a profound impact. Jason, who had remained stoic throughout the trial, finally broke down. The jury was visibly moved. Was it possible to hold a man fully responsible for actions that were forged in a crucible of such unimaginable horror? For Michael Perry's sentencing, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. The prosecution had argued that his actions showed a clear future dangerousness, a key requirement for a death sentence in Texas. His history of escalating violence, his lack of remorse during the confession, and the cold-blooded nature of the crime painted the picture of a man who could not be rehabilitated. The jury agreed. The verdict was death. Lisa Balin, Sandra Stotler's daughter and Adam's sister, sat in the courtroom, having endured every horrifying detail of her family's final moments. For her, Perry's sentence felt like justice. "I needed to look into his eyes and see if he was the monster I had made him out to be," she would later say. The trial confirmed he was. In Jason Burquette's case, the jury's decision was far more complex. Delbert Burquette's testimony had introduced a powerful element of doubt, not about his son's guilt, but about his culpability. Could they, in good conscience, sentence a man to death when his entire life had been a masterclass in violence taught by his own father? The deliberation was fraught with tension. When they returned with a verdict, it was stunning. By a narrow margin of just 2 votes, the jury chose life in prison over death. Jason Burquette would be eligible for parole in 2041, after serving 40 years. For Lisa Balan and the victims' families, this verdict was a bitter pill. All the testimony proved to me was that Burquette was irreparably broken, she stated. Frustrated that his brokenness had saved him from the fate his accomplice would face. The two sentences created a deep fracture in the community's sense of justice. Two men, both 19, committed the same crime, participated in the same triple homicide, yet their fates were now set on radically different paths. One would spend decades behind bars, with a distant hope of one day being free. The other was now on a direct, irreversible path to the execution chamber in Huntsville, Texas. The public was left to grapple with a deeply unsettling question: was this justice or a lottery? Michael Perry was transferred to the Polunsky unit, home to Texas's male death row inmates. For nearly 9 years, he lived in a 60-square-foot concrete and steel cell for 23 hours a day. Life here is a monotonous, soul-crushing routine designed to strip away all autonomy. While other inmates might find religion, express remorse, or come to terms with their crimes, Perry did the opposite. He doubled down on his innocence, crafting a narrative of himself as the ultimate victim, framed by his friend, coerced by police, and failed by the justice system. His legal team filed appeal after appeal, attacking every facet of the case. They argued the confession was illegally obtained, that his trial representation was ineffective, and that he was too young to fully comprehend his actions. Each appeal was systematically reviewed and rejected by state and federal courts. During this time, his case caught the attention of acclaimed German filmmaker Werner Herzog. For his 2011 documentary Into the Abyss, Herzog conducted extensive interviews with Perry just 8 days before his execution. In these interviews, Perry presents a compelling, articulate, and often charming persona. He speaks of his hopes and dreams, his love for his family, and his bewilderment at his circumstances. Yet, Herzog himself concluded that despite Perry's persuasive performance, the evidence of his guilt was simply overwhelming. In a final, desperate legal maneuver, Perry's lawyers seized on a seeming discrepancy in the official timeline. The medical examiner had initially estimated Sandra Stotler's time of death as October 26th, a day Perry was briefly in jail on the traffic charge. They argued this was new evidence proving his innocence, but the argument fell apart under scrutiny. Forensic experts clarified that determining a precise time of death for a body submerged in water for days is nearly impossible. The date was only a rough estimate within a wide range. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals and the U.S. Supreme Court both rejected this final appeal. As his execution date of July 1, 2010 drew near, Michael Perry had exhausted all legal avenues. His adoptive father had passed away just weeks before, a final tragedy in a life defined by them. Yet, even with death just days away, he refused to offer the victims' families the one thing they still sought: the truth. On July 1, 2010, the clock began its final countdown for Michael Perry. He was moved from the Polunsky unit to the Walls unit in Huntsville, where the execution chamber is located. For his last meal, he requested a simple cheeseburger, French fries, and a vanilla milkshake. In the final hours, he was allowed phone calls. He spoke to his adoptive mother, Gail Perry, the woman who had spent a lifetime trying to save him from the darkness within. Through the glass of the visitation booth, they shared their final goodbyes. At 6:03 p.m., Michael Perry was led into the death chamber and strapped to the gurney. In the witness room, two groups watched through separate windows. On one side were the families of Sandra Stotler, Adam Stotler, and Jeremy Richardson. On the other was Gail Perry, there to witness the state-sanctioned death of the son she still loved. The warden asked if he had a final statement. Perry turned his head towards his victims' families. His voice, cracking with emotion, delivered the stunning words: "I want to start off by saying to everyone involved in this atrocity that they are all forgiven by me." He cast himself as the magnanimous victim, his own execution the only crime worth acknowledging. Then he looked at his mother. "Mom, I love you," he cried. "I'm coming home, Dad. Coming home, Dad," he repeated, a reference to his recently deceased adoptive father. As the lethal dose of pentobarbital began to flow into his veins, a single tear rolled down his right cheek. He gasped 4 times, his breathing slowed, and then stopped. At 6:17 p.m., Michael James Perry was pronounced dead for Lisa Ballon, watching the man who murdered her mother and brother take his last breath. His final words erased any possibility of pity. "When he said he forgave us, I knew justice had been served today," she told reporters. "I knew that he was the monster she had imagined. The 9-year wait for this moment was over. For the families, it wasn't closure, but it was an end." The execution of Michael Perry closed a chapter, but the story was far from over. The ripples from that one night of violence in 2001 continue to spread, impacting lives decades later. Today, Jason Burquette remains incarcerated in the Texas prison system, serving his life sentence. Now in his 40s, he will not be eligible for parole until November 1, 2041, when he will be nearly 60 years old. His connection to the criminal world has persisted even behind bars. In 2018, a girlfriend was arrested for attempting to mail him methamphetamine in prison, a stark reminder of the addictions that fueled his crimes. His father, Delbert, whose tearful testimony saved his son's life, died in prison in 2022, while serving his own sentence for indecency with a child. For the families of the victims, the loss is a permanent fixture in their lives. Lisa Ballon continues to honor the memory of her mother Sandra and her brother Adam, ensuring their stories are not forgotten. The Richardson family is forever without their 18-year-old son, Jeremy, a young man who died simply because he was a good friend trying to help someone he thought was in trouble. The community of Montgomery County was also permanently scarred. The senseless, random nature of the attack, 3 people killed for cars, shattered the illusion of safety, even in a gated community like Bentwater. Doors were locked, and a sense of vulnerability crept into a place that was built to keep it out. The case serves as a chilling local legend, a reminder that evil can erupt anywhere, at any time, for the most trivial of reasons. The legal outcome continues to be debated, a stark example of how 2 perpetrators in the same crime can face vastly different consequences, leaving a lingering question of fairness hanging over the entire case. What is the legacy of a crime like this? It's the story of 3 innocent lives extinguished for the price of 2 used cars, a nurse who healed the sick, a 16-year-old boy, and an 18-year-old on the cusp of his adult life, all reduced to obstacles in the way of a joyride. The case forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about justice and mercy. Was the system fair when it executed Michael Perry but spared Jason Burquette? Burquette's horrific childhood earned him a jury's sympathy, suggesting that perhaps we can be too broken to be held fully responsible for our actions. Perry, whose upbringing was troubled but less extreme, received no such clemency. Where does society draw the line between cause and effect, between a monstrous act and a monstrous upbringing? Ultimately, this case is a testament to how quickly a normal life can intersect with unthinkable violence. Sandra, Adam, and Jeremy were not involved in crime or high-risk behavior. They were simply living their lives, unlucky enough to cross paths with 2 desperate young men who believed they were entitled to what others had earned. It's a tragic reminder that the most dangerous threats often come not from elaborate criminal masterminds, but from the quiet desperation and moral emptiness festering in our own communities. 3 families were shattered, not by a grand scheme, but by a simple, selfish desire. And that, perhaps, is the most terrifying lesson of all. The story of the Stotler and Richardson families is a powerful call for awareness. If this case has impacted you, please like this video and share it to help keep their memories alive. Subscribe to The Executioner's Pen and join the conversation in the comments below. What does justice mean to you in a case like this? Thank you for watching.